Hi, I'm Captain Alec Robbie. I've been a sport fishing guide and captain for over 15 years. I've taken people fishing from the waters of Point Conception, California, to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and everywhere in between. During that time, it has taught me the importance of preserving the wild places we enjoy for years to come. Join me as we discuss techniques, conservation, and engaging our community to keep our world wild and to keep our outdoor pastime strong for generations. This is Keep It Wild with Alec Robbie. Well, hello everyone. Today I would like to talk about long range, the San Diego based long range fishing, and could go about it a couple ways. But I really wanted to avoid a episode where I just talk about it myself the whole time. So I figured it'd be best if I invite a guest, and that guest, his name is Pat Wade here. He was a client of mine for several trips back in the day when I used to run the Polaris Supreme. He's been on a number of long range trips and all the sectors I'd like to hit on, both the short range, medium, and really long range. And we'll get into that a little later. I just felt like it's good to bring someone on that has a little less of a biased view on it rather than just experts or people who've been doing it for so long. He's done a lot of the sectors, but still relatively new to the game. So, and he also is just starting to get into the local Southern California charter business too. But without further ado, welcome, Pat.
Thank you, Alec. Glad to be on, and excited to talk about this. Looking forward to it.
Sweet. Well, I guess to start off, just from the beginning, talk about your fishing background. You know, it could, as far back as you want to now. Like, what's Pat Wade about?
Sure. So I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, just outside of Seattle, a place called Vashon Island. That's really where I started fishing. I think I was in preschool or first grade or whatever it was, and I'd wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning before it was time to go to school and go down to the beach and go fishing, and then come back home and jump on the bus and go to school. So that's kind of where I got my start. And then in the mid 70s, we moved to San Diego, and funny enough, my dad was in the process of buying a charter boat, a boat called the Miss L, and that was in 1976. And so that was my first time really doing any offshore fishing. I was only 5 years old at the time, but that was kind of my first exposure to deep sea fishing. And so that didn't last too long, and then kind of got away from deep sea fishing for a long, long time until I ended up moving to Florida, and lived in Florida for a number of years in the Florida Keys and then Fort Lauderdale area. And that's when I really got into it again, and got into it competitively, fished a lot of billfish tournaments, what they call meat tournaments in South Florida, which is like kingfish and Dorado and Wahoo, stuff like that, as well as some tournaments in the Bahamas. And then over the course of time, I ended up moving back to Southern California, and kind of, still had that in my blood. So wanted to get back into the deep sea fishing thing. And I think that's eventually where you and I met. Was I think I booked an 8-day on the Supreme, and it's all been history from there. I've just been addicted to it, and love being out on the water, and just spending that time at sea it's a lot of fun. And the friendships and relationships you make on those kinds of trips are really, really cool, and kind of crazy how quickly you can become close friends with people and how long those relationships last.
Right. So what you just described was, pretty, from what I would say, a well-rounded angler for several different sectors of the United States: the Pacific Northwest, Florida, the Southeast, and our little Southern California West Coast style there. And so from when did you kind of start fishing again in Southern California? How many years ago? Because I think I met you 4 years ago. How long was that ago? 10 years?
Yeah. I want to think my first trip on the Supreme might have been 2018 or 2019.
Mm-hmm.
But the first time I owned a commercial paint contracting company, and one of my employees was a big fisherman, and he it was like 2015, right when that I think the yellowfin and two bluefin started showing up again. And he's like, "Oh, dude, you got to come with me and go fishing." And I'm like, "Oh, dude, I don't want to get on one of those cattle boats." And he's like, "No, no, it's a lot of fun." So, anyways, we went. I think on like a day and a half trip, um, and it was kind of funny. I wasn't really comfortable fishing live bait with that many people on the boat. And so at the time, the Colt Snipers had just come out. And so he had me grab a couple of those. And I just stood on the bow and I was hanging fish left and right. Meanwhile, everybody was back in the stern and getting in tangles and all that. And it's funny because the captain kept sticking his head out the window and kind of giving me the thumbs up and laughing as I kept yelling, color, and guys kept having to come catfish for me. So I think I hung like 5 yellowfin and, like an hour and a half on Colt Snipers.
That's awesome. So kind of like roughly 2014, 2015 is kind of when you started getting back into Southern. Okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny you say that, because that is, I don't know, at least in my mind, we could confide in other experts later or whatever, but that year was a couple of things happened to kind of change the local Southern California landscape into being a much more, I don't want to misrepresent it, but like a little more of a pelagic destination. That's the year when bluefin really started establishing themselves pretty close. And, this is a topic we can go on about this. This is a topic for a different podcast. If there's any experts or biologists out there that, was able to study the bluefin and saw some change during that time, because after 2015, they posted up and I don't want to say they just stayed in Southern California, but they didn't go very far before they came back, and they got bigger and they bit better. It all just got better. And that's been going on for, that's literally almost 10 years, 9 years or so. So that's something to kind of take a note on there. However, we can talk a lot about that, but San Diego based long range fishing is kind of what I wanted to talk about here, which for people all over the country here, we're starting to get kind of specific. So I'll kind of make it a little more simplified. At least in Southern California, there's other parts of the world too, or other parts of the United States at least, that have these cattle boats or party boats, whatever you want to call them. They're kind of bigger boats. Several people come on, kind of split the cost of the boat per se. They make it easy, just spots and tickets and whatever like that. So, you can get a bunch of people on a single boat. It goes out for 5 hours at a time, one day, day and a half, all the way up to 15, 18, even 22-day trips. And, the party boat concept is very effective in the Southern California landscape. But to go one step further, a pretty incredible, I think, kind of an international notable thing to highlight is the San Diego-based long range fleet. It is a fleet of boats, and they are slightly bigger than the average party boat. They are just purpose built to accommodate, several people, 18 to 24, sometimes 30, depending on the trip load. Longer the trip, lesser the people. But basically, it leaves out of San Diego and can take you to really remote destinations. And that's kind of some of the places I want to kind of highlight here, the places of our world that are remote and either hardly ever fished or just a lot less than the, more localized thing. So with this long range fleet, it has made it very reasonable trip vacation to some incredible places for a very reasonable price. And that's kind of what I want to highlight. And Pat here definitely has been on all of the three flavors, three flavors kind of being what I'd call local. You got 1 to 5 day trips, being kind of San Diego to halfway down Baja, more or less. Then you got 5 to 10 day trips being everything above that, and now kind of going all the way to the tip of Baja, so Cabo San Lucas. So everything, the entire Baja is in your range for the 5 to 10 day trips. And then the 10 day trips and beyond. And each got a different genre of areas to cover. Each got a different area of species that come about. And it's amazing here. But we'll start from the beginning. Like, Pat, um, in your fishing, call it career, compared to Washington, compared to Florida, like what is the long range, the Southern California long range fleet, like how does that 1 to 5 day trip kind of stand in, in your experience of fishing?
Well, I'd say to start with, when I fished in Washington, it was only from a private boat, and actually the same in Florida. I don't think I ever went out on any kind of head boats or charter boats or, whatever you want to call it. It was all private stuff. So much more specialized. You're fishing with friends. And, Washington, it's a lot of trolling for salmon. It was really all we ever did there because I was up in Puget Sound. And then in South Florida, you could be running to the Bahamas, and the Bahamas is only 50 miles. So, you're talking, depending on the boat, an hour and a half, give or take, to run over and fish the Bahamas for bottom fish and wahoo and dorado and billfish, things like that. And that is more of an experience. Not only are you fishing, but it's like a vacation getaway, because, you're going to a foreign country and, you're in the Bahamas.
Right.
Pretty epic. And so, but that's a lot of like running and gunning. A lot of it was, the boats I fished on were almost exclusively center console.
The thing that comes to my mind is it's more moving parts. Like you said, go fast center console. You get to the Bahamas, you need a place to stay, and then your kind of home base is that place. And then, you kind of go out, branch, and come back. Whereas, that could be like a day to 3 day trip, but you're kind of still in the same limited radius of your center console, rather than a 3 day trip of being basically on the liveaboard of a, Southern California party boat, and just continuing to build. Like, not a moment is wasted in that. You could continue to go further and more remote, or you can continue to stay on the same school of fish as the same night before. You just keep on them for however much time you have, and that seems to be like a pretty standout. I mean, just the unique part about it, rather, is that.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at when you fish out of San Diego, on a long range boat, or a charter boat, even. It really should be thought of as a fishing lodge, a traveling fishing lodge, because that's really what it is. Is that as soon as you arrive to the landing, you've got people helping you with your gear, with your luggage, like helping you board the boat. And so from like really the time you get to the landing, it's like going to a 5-star resort. And then you get on the boat, you get your stuff situated. And, you got a professional crew there of, usually it's 3 to 4 deckhands. You got a captain and a second, you got a chef and a galley assistant. And so, it's really, you're walking onto a lodge. It's just that the lodge happens to be floating, and it's going to take you to the fish instead of you going straight to the fish. So from that perspective, it's very relaxing, because you don't have to worry about finding the fish. Like, I fish with on center consoles, it's a lot of running and gunning. You can get caught in weather, things like that. These boats are so comfortable, and just, endless amounts of bait, endless amounts of, freezer hold, or RSW holds for your fish. And then, you're most of the time getting gourmet meals, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and snacks in between.
Yeah. So you did mention something there. I think the words he used were like endless bait or like some along those regards. That's another extremely unique part about the San Diego based long range fleet and Southern California in general is there is a routine to where you do not have to catch your own bait. You there is a fleet of boats that go out, they seine up sardines and anchovies and whatever mackerel, put them in these receivers, let them cure up, which basically just means that, like, if you scoop up a fish from the water, a little bit of damage is going to be done, slime and whatever damage is done. So they're a little bit weaker when they're put in these like underwater receivers. But so anyway, they put them there, they let them cure up, and then however many days later, it gets time to, or they get stronger and healthier and become better baits. And this is all coordinated with, like Pat said, you loading the passengers, your gear on, you make your way out, conveniently load up baits, hundreds, if not thousands, of individual bait fish at a time onto your boat. There's no need to, not saying there's no need. It's always nice to catch your bait. I'll say that, but you're not on the spot. You got something to start with. You got thousands of sardines to use as live bait to start, and that's a incredible feat in itself. There's other parts of the world where you're paying what is it in Cabo to like fish with a cavai? I don't know. You roll up to these like guys that catch bait, and it's dollars, $10. Some baits are like $10. So they're quite a bit for a couple of baits. You get like 5 of them for a day, and you're like, oh, I gotta save them. You're in real bad shape on a long range boat if you're down to 5 bait ration a day. Like, it's definitely something we take for granted down there, which, like, looking from an outside perspective, it's a really incredible logistical endeavor that that's just there. It's part of this floating lodge. Like Pat said, your meals are just ready for you. You have meals ready for you. You have, beverages. You have nice air conditioned rooms. It's comfortable. Weather comes up. It's a big boat. It handles it, and like, if you run your own boat, you're using that bandwidth of running a boat. But if you're, and like the other scenario, if you're like using a guide, they still got to worry about going in, at the end of the day or a time frame. But this time frame is just extended. So it's like, 5 more minutes, whatever, well, we're on a 3-day trip. We'll just stay the night, and then, whatever. The fish are a little further, and they keep going a little further and further. Now the species, like kind of like, like I said, 1 to 3, 4-day range are mainly like more summertime pelagic fish, be it tuna, yellowtail, dorado, stuff like that. You can just, there's some inshore stuff too, but that's kind of the main stuff that focuses on. It's a lot of like migratory offshore fish. Now transiting or pivoting to the next sector, be it 5 to 10-day trips. That's all that plus basically hundreds of more miles down into Baja. So like Pat said, like a lodge that just keeps going. You keep going down, you bring all the stuff, it just keeps building. First day you could fish close, second day a little further, and it just keeps going on. And like, next morning you wake up you look out the window and it's a remote part of Baja, just uninhabited mountain ranges, desolate coast, but the sea is so abundant with life, both offshore and inshore. And you go to some spots that are just, for lack of better words, just a pain in the ass to get to if you have to get there on a traditional boat, like a center console or a charter boat or like a smaller boat. Like, like you said, your first trip was like an 8-day, like, or not for your first trip on the Supreme. Like, what were your thoughts there? Like, once you, like, coming from other parts, other fishing styles, and then just seeing that as far as like location, species, like how it just melts together fishing logistic wise. How is that?
Yeah. So one of the things, like, I got a couple of buddies that have a hard time doing it because they don't like to be, not fishing for 2 days. So for example, in the 8-day, you spend 2 days. And on that particular trip, we went straight to Alejos Rocks. And so that's, you leave San Diego, it's 48 hours straight chug there. And I found it relaxing. The first day, you're just kind of hanging out, drinking some beers, sitting out on the back, like, you're all charged up, excited, looking forward to the trip. And then the next day, you might start putting your gear together and, sort of quote unquote playing tackle box. And, you start getting charged up. And then, you still got one more day. So, we end up probably playing cards, you watch movies, you get caught up on your sleep. And I can still remember, waking up that morning and way off in the distance, I can just see the two little pinnacles sticking out. And I knew I was about to, go fish Alejos Rocks for the first time. But I mean, I can remember watching inside sport fishing videos, like when it was back on a VHS tape, and then, going to Alejos Rocks and like going, oh my God, this is so cool. Like I've been, watching stories about this forever. And just to get to there and just know that, is like, I don't probably consider it as remote anymore. I've probably gotten a little bit numb to it, but
that's what I'm saying.
For so many people, like it's just such a special place to go see. And, we start trolling. I think we first started trolling for wahoo, and that's my favorite fish to catch, of all time. I fished a lot of that in the Bahamas, high-speed trolling for wahoo. So we start trolling for wahoo and get hooked up, and, people that have never caught a wahoo before in their life, and it's, considered such an exotic species. And just to see the smile on their face and the camaraderie when you're high-fiving, other guys that you just met within the last day or two, for, catching their first wahoo and first exotic. It's such a bucket list fish for so many people. So, yeah, I mean, it's just you spend a couple of days there, and then, Captain, we fished throughout the day, and then he says, all right, guys, we're going to make a move to the ridge. And, and then that's, whatever, 180 miles or something towards the coast. And, so then we leave late afternoon so that we can be there for the, bite in the morning.
Before we pivot to the ridge, I just want to elaborate. Like, I see, this is why I wanted Pat, like an unbiased person on it. It's because it's like, this is all such an incredible experience that before you know it, his story's going to be back at the dock. But you know what I mean? It's hard to, like, I just want to break it up a little bit because it is such an incredible experience. But like, what he's talking about is these islands. They're just spires in the middle of the ocean. They're 480 miles basically straight south of San Diego. They're like 180 miles off of the nearest land of Baja, Mexico. By every definition, that is incredibly remote. Like, that is out there. That is not in the beaten path. There's no Pongero going to be out. There's no little boat. You're on this big fishing machine going there, and it's made super convenient. And it's just like, that's an incredible aspect to this. And, like you said, departing that day, the excitement, and honestly, it's like kind of nice, people, like you said, people kind of get intimidated. They're like, oh, I look at it all on paper, and it's like, I don't want to sit there. I don't want to not fish for a day. I want to fish every second. I'm like, well, like Pat said, you get there, just packed all your stuff down. Some people are flying in. It's nice to kind of decompress a little bit. And then that day is mainly decompression. People are just pumped to not be driving or on a plane or lugging, bringing their gear to the boat. But once it's on the boat, it's like, take your time, unpack, make your room nice. And before you know it, it's like dinner and bedtime. Most people are tired. Like, if you ask them to fish right away, you'd be like, oh my God, this is a lot of stuff to unpack, literally. And then, then the next day you got basically tackle day, and you got a week more to fish. So you want to make sure your next week of fishing is optimized and ready to go. So that's, I don't know, those days are actually a true blessing of like the first day being like, all right, let's get everything good. Check the line, check the knots, check your wire, check your hooks, check your whatever. That way, when it's game time, when you roll up to those rocks, like Pat said, and say the wahoo are there, you put the jigs in the water. These wahoo they behave so incredible, I think, in this part of the world. And I don't think they behave in this schooling manner many other places. But when it gets going, you want to make sure your ducks are in a line. You want to make sure your other jigs are ready, your other leaders, because it's just so exciting. You ain't going to find anyone like, oh, I lost they bit through the wire or something happened. Let me just recrimp another jig. Like, you just want to tie one on and make hay while the sun shines. It's that day of prep is like super key. Like, by the time you're playing cards and shooting the shit, you're in good shape. But that's just one thing I wanted to emphasize is the remoteness of this pinnacle in proximity to like the rest of the angling world, and how we just make it's just so easy out of these style of boats. So okay, Lejos Rocks, amazing in itself. Now you go to the ridge. Basically, when I said 180 miles to the nearest point of land, you're going 150, and that's kind of what Pat's talking about. You go to the ridge now. Now, how is that there?
Well, so this sort of ties into what you were talking about, how, some people are just so anxious and they just want to fish the minute they get on the boat. But, when you get, even at, if we back up to Lejos, we fished Lejos Rocks, but then ran, 10 miles west and went and fished a place called Lejos Bank for yellowtail. But, you could literally, I think that first night, I was fishing all night. I never went to sleep. And so It sort of goes back to, you want to get your rest leading up to this, because that yellowtail bite at night, I mean, that can just be, world-class yellowtail fishing, fishing yellowtail on dropper loop at night. And so I stayed up. I think I went to bed for 2 hours after dinner, and then I was probably up at 10 or 11 o'clock and fished all the way straight through to the next day. Because, again, you've got, major FOMO. You don't want to be asleep when somebody, lands a 50-pound yellowtail or, 40-pound white sea bass, or, if you're at the ridge or something like that. So sort of speaks again, wanting to get caught up on your sleep.
Right. Yeah, you have every right to go to sleep, which is fine. But like Pat, it's your vacation. Do it if you want. If you want to be a banker's hour fisherman, every right to. But the FOMO he's talking about is like that's the opportunity that's like kind of intangible. Is like your lodge is on good grounds all the time. Sometimes they're traveling at night, but a lot of times they're anchored up, and there's good fishing to be had at night. And sometimes it's wide open, and people who want to be woken up, we can wake them up. But sometimes it's just like you're out putting in the work and getting out what you put in. And there could be a handful of yellowtail that are just fish of lifetimes, and you're not going to get them if you're sleeping. So that's a huge factor to the pacing yourself and making sure you're in it for the long haul. Like you said, Pat, you could just not sleep the whole trip. It's crazy.
Lots of coffee gets drank on those trips.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, moving to the inside on the ridge, that's really where an incredible variety of fishing happens. And that was certainly my experience. And my buddy Tim was on the trip. It was, for both of us, our first time doing an 8-day trip. And I mean, just you name it, we caught it. I mean, it was wahoo, yellowfin, dorado, white sea bass, cabria. I'm probably leaving some stuff off, Alec, that you're more familiar with than me. But yeah, I mean, and again, that's another situation where, like, went to sleep for a couple hours right after dinner, and then you're up fishing all night. Because again, I don't want to miss that bite. And I figure we got 2 days to travel home. When the fishing's done, I'll catch up on my sleep then.
Yes. And so, when you said like, I'm probably leaving stuff out, that's exactly, in a nutshell, that's kind of the theme of my mind. Like those mid-range trips, the ones that can like make it to the rocks and the ridge and whatever, the phrase, I'm leaving stuff out. The variety that is concentrated on these underwater banks, pinnacles, whatever you want to say, the ridge, quote unquote, is basically you go off the Baja coast, and there's a just a spine of mountains, like a little mountain range with just pinnacles, and each one has potential to have I just dang near every fish in Baja, less like mangrove ridden fish or like surf perch and snook. I don't just any like pelagic fish, and even some that aren't. You got broomtail grouper, you got leopard grouper, you got cabria, you got pargo, you got tons of kinds of pargo. You have the man, I don't want to get on a whole laundry list here because I can eat up some time just saying, but to Pat's point, we can anchor up on one of these spots, and you can cast a wahoo bomb or a wahoo lure, bam, catch a wahoo. You can sink a bait down to the bottom, boom, get a yellowtail. You could fly line a bait with just a live bait, send it out there, tuna. Like they're all in the, I don't want to say the same spot because when I ran the boat, literally you shimmy 50 feet one way and then it's just a different world. One anchor job is just on the where it dips off a little deeper and it's just tuna, a little bit of yellowtail, mainly tuna and wahoo, and then you get tight to the pinnacles and it's just those groupers and yellows and just all these weird trigger fish and stuff. They're not weird. I love all the fish there, but it's just life, you know what I mean? So within, gosh darn it, each pinnacle, if you go from the pinnacle out a quarter mile, not even 300 yards, that's the concentration of species and life that's in that is undescribable, between wahoo, yellowfin tuna, skipjack, dorado, the pargos. We'll just encompass the pargos, the groupers, the marlin, the sailfish. Yeah, sometimes a year stripers can kind of get there pretty thick, like striped marlin. And there's times when you're fishing tuna and you'll hook a black marlin. It had to be a 500-pound black marlin one time. We were fishing for grouper, which once they get of a certain size, they'll eat bigger things naturally, like skipjack or baby yellowfin tuna or whatever. And so sometimes we'll catch an 8-pound, 10-pound skipjack tuna and put a hook in it and have them fly line it out, just set it out and just let it swim freely. And the idea is a grouper, it's so shallow at some of these pinnacles. They're not really on the bottom. The bottom with gin clear water is 60 feet looking up. They could see everything. So you're fly lining a bait and they can come up and get it. And it's a very effective way to catch these fish. And there's one time we're doing that and boom, a guy's I'm bit, and set the hook. And usually with a grouper, if you hook them, they are a freight train back to their safe zone, the little ridge or crevice or whatever to go in. That's where they're at. It's pretty distinct bite. It's a true test of strength, because it's if you let them get a couple feet, they're in safety. You can't let them go or they're gone. I don't know. Some people have tried the old let them try to swim out or whatever, and I haven't seen that be very successful. Anyway, this guy sent it out. I'm bit, and sets the hook, and it's swimming up, and I'm oh, looks like it's a shark. That's what sharks the groupers, they swim down, and they're the person begins to get their ass kicked. That's kind of what happens. But this thing started coming up. I'm oh, that's weird. It's a lazy shark, and then 40 feet behind the boat, this black marlin just tries. It looks like it's trying to breach, but it's too heavy. It gets to its pec fins, and it that comes down, and it's from its belly to the top of where its dorsal fin is 3.5, 4. It was just the thickest fish I've ever laid eyes on. I'm oh my God. So these pinnacles down there have the potential for some of the best variety of, I don't know, I can't say this in an international scale, but it's some of the best variety of fish I have ever came across. And like Pat said, you're bringing your lodge to the literal spot, not you're on it 24. If you're there for 2 days, 24/7, or the captain will mix it up and go other places. But anyway, that's the hot take on the the kind of ridge situation. Would you like to elaborate on that or kind of move along?
Yeah, I think we can keep moving along. I think we covered that pretty good. And
Yes. And so just to kind of round this all out, between the ridge, the rocks, and San Diego is hundreds of miles of excellent coastline for basically everything in between. The offshore tuna, bluefin, yellowfin. There was a time, kind of at the beginning of my time, where albacore used to frequent that zone. But either way, like an offshore variety, or you can dip into the beach, and it's like the main target there is yellowtail, California yellowtail, just kind of part of the jack family, like an amberjack of sorts, but the California's version. Amazing eating, amazing fighting, just so much good country inshore all the way up. So, I don't know how I forgot how your trip kind of went, but like, if that's kind of like, all right, we got to start heading back, you'll be fishing on your way back. And sometimes it's like drive at night, fish offshore, look, make some drifts, catch some offshore fish, dorado, tuna, whatever, go inshore, catch yellowtail, but you're fishing the whole way up for different species of fish. And like, that really like weaves together quite the experience. And, before you know it, you're back in San Diego and you're like, oh, I just been fishing for a week straight. Like, this is amazing. So, yeah, that's kind of, that's that mid-range situation. Moving on to what I would call long range. The long range stuff would be, I'd call it, you can kind of call it a 10-day to 18-day range. The 10-day trips, they kind of are just they're an 8-day trip with one more sector of like the last leg of Baja till you get to Cabo San Lucas, which is usually like pretty good, or usually good, bigger yellowfin tuna fishing. So basically that same routine of an 8-day or patch trip that we described, you just now add a big tuna aspect. By big tuna, I mean like 100 to 200 plus pound trip, a chance of that sprinkled in on the furthest extremis before they start working their way back up. So that's kind of the 10-day difference right there. Oh, sorry. Before we move on to the long range trips, I forgot to incorporate one very iconic place. What about you fish Guadalupe Island? This island is an amazing place, but the ability to fish it permit wise and ability wise comes and goes, just depending on the certain political climates and policies and stuff like that. But there is times where it is open. And Pat, I know you fished on one of those trips. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So, again, another sort of bucket list thing, looking back into watching Inside Sport Fishing on VHS tapes way back, whenever that was, and, seeing videos of them fishing Guadalupe. So, yeah, I was able to fish Guadalupe. I don't know if it was, I think probably about 2020. It was the last year that it was open, most recently. And, that was I think that was an 8-day trip, and left out of San Diego. And basically the next afternoon, you're going to be at Guadalupe to start fishing. So a little more than 24 hours from leaving San Diego, and you're fishing Guadalupe. And what's cool about Guadalupe is you're on the anchor, and while you're on the anchor, you can catch 120, 150 pound yellowfin. You can catch giant calicos. You can catch yellowtail. But the whole time you're on the anchor. And so you fish all day, and then at night, what's awesome is, the captain takes the boat and goes and anchors up in shallow water, and you may as well be in a hotel room on land. Like, it's just flat, calm as can be. You get a great night's sleep. Well, when we were there were a few nights we actually made some bait and caught bait to use the next day for for chumming and also for us to use on fly line. But then the other like sort of really, really cool part about it is the population of great white sharks. So not only are you trying to catch, these giant yellowfin and get them in, but almost the entire time you've got at least one, if not multiple great white sharks basically circling underneath the boat, waiting for that fish to get up and down. As you catch tuna, you get them, they get to the point where they kind of get in their death spiral up and down. And these sharks know that that's, the dinner bell, and they just sort of sit underneath the boat. So you expend all that energy, you get the fish up and down. Well, then you really, really got to crank and try to get it past the sharks before the sharks come. So on my trip, I went 9 for 18 on yellowfin. And 6 of the fish I lost were to great whites. And even though it sucks to lose it, it's just from a nature perspective, a marine perspective, such an awesome sight to see these big, giant great whites, just take one chomp of a 120-pound yellowfin, and all of a sudden all you got left is, a 20-pound head or a 30-pound head. They just ate 90 or 100 pounds of yellowfin in one bite. So
that's not exaggerating at all.
No.
Like it how we eat a candy bar is how they could eat a 80, 100-pound yellowfin tuna. One bite, one good, like when they get a good, angle on it and they get, it doesn't they don't nick it. They just get it. It's like, man, this 100-pound fish is 50 pounds now, like straight down the middle. One bite, you see it. I saw it one time, it was an 80-pounder, and it came T-boned it, and the head and the tail just sunk. But big chunk out of the middle was taken off. I'm like, oh, nice.
Yeah, we had something similar happen. We were somebody was fighting a fish, and it was near the anchor, and the great white came to get the yellowfin and sort of turned sideways and went through. I don't know how thick that anchor rope is, I don't know, 2-inch rope or 3-inch rope. I mean, it went through it like it was a piece of floss, and we thought I felt bad.
With his teeth, it bit it, and they lost the anchor.
Yeah, it didn't even try to bite it. It just had its mouth open and just cut it like a razor blade. And I felt bad because, one of the deckhands said, yeah, that was about $5,000 we just lost between the anchor, the chain, the rope, all that stuff. And luckily they had backup on the boat. But
it's funny you say that. I was like, literally the first thing when you said it went, I'm like, I clarified the anchor line. And you're like, oh yeah. I'm like, no, that went $5,000. You say is deckhands. Yeah, that's kind of a bum way to go. But when you got 175 tons of bobbing pressure on an anchor line and some sharp teeth that nick it, just bing, goodbye. Yeah. It's pretty intense. Pat hit on a great point here, and it's kind of a nice objective way to look at it. We go fishing and we want to catch and, have successful catches of our fish, and meaning land it or release it or whatever. But the real definition of like a wild, an untouched place is the thing that makes it wild is everything about it in nature. There's no one-sided environment in this world. Like you go to a place where there's an abundance of tuna, there's going to be predators. You go to a place where there's an abundance of like elk, there's going to be wolves or black bears or cougar, whatever. You know what I mean? I don't want to say we need to embrace that, but that's how you're in a wild place. That's how you're where we have very little, humans have much less impact on an environment. And with that comes tuna that are just hungry, trying to survive and live and eating, with quote unquote, like reckless abandon. They're, you're bringing these sardines and bait. So it's, hooking fish is good, but you're contending with natural predators and these sharks. And that's kind of the major, allure to Guadalupe Island for like the majority of the world is those white sharks. And, we were so fortunate back then and maybe soon in the future, who knows, what that climate looks like, but we're so fortunate to be able to be plugged in to that, environment. And, it's just nice. Like if you do go to a place like that, appreciate it, keep it good. And like, harvest what you need. And you can release the rest or whatever, but like we are very fortunate to be able to frequent those places, and nothing illustrated that more than how quickly access to Guadalupe Island came and how quickly it was taken away. So,
Yeah, and I think you just sort of prompted the thought in my head, but even the landscape of the island, while you're there fishing in that backdrop that you got, I mean, people kind of call it Jurassic Park, but it really is. I mean, there's only a certain part of where you can really see a little bit of the Navy base that's there, but most of the time you've just got the most stunning backdrop. And what's it called? South Island.
Well, there's a couple, like, so it's a really volcanic island, middle of the abyssal Pacific Ocean. It comes up, so you got a normal kind of, I won't say a normal looking island, but like kind of semi-normal volcanic looking island, but just random places are just sheer like cliffs or like a volcano cinder head. There's a spot called Cinder Cone. There's a spot like, so what you're probably referring to is we call it Outer Rock, but I think the Mexicans call it like Roca Zapata. I mean, someone might want to fact check me on that, but from a certain angle, it looks like a shoe, like a clog. And where we fish is in the back of it. So it's like, I actually have this really amazing picture taken by this photographer, Sean Sullivan. And it is like, we're fishing at this pinnacle right next to that giant rock. It looks like we're fishing at the base of the Grand Canyon. Like you don't see an end of the rock. It's incredible. So like, just these sheer geological, like not anomalies, but just amazing geological features that are just all about the place. And there's no there's one little spot you can kind of see buildings. And I bet you didn't even see that when you were fishing. It's kind of like tucked way in and whatever. But when you're fishing in this little southern part of it, it's just like crazy looking rock, and you're right next to it. And there's another rock and like a volcano looking thing, and yeah, amazing backdrop, and you're catching offshore pelagic fish right next to it. It makes you feel like you can just sit on the rock and cast in the water and have a chance like catching 100-pound tuna or a great white. I'll tell you what, you do not want to go cliff diving off those cliffs. The amount of sharks at that place is staggering, both white sharks and big makos. I mean, shoot, man, it's pretty wild. Like I've been to places where there's a lot of miscellaneous types of sharks, but the concentration of those big sharks is something else there. And you get to see them most of the time. You get to see them firsthand. Big, gray, amazing creature just patrolling your boat. Like, hey, these people are slowing down these delicious sushi items for us. I want to take an 80-pound bite, It's incredible. Cool. Well, so that's kind of that now. Excuse me. That kind of wraps up the mid-range of the long-range swath. Now we can move on to the further stuff. Like I said, 10-day trips is just, you can do that plus a little more. Just get a little dabble of the bigger grade of yellowfin tuna. That is, again, kind of what the long-range fleet's known for around the world. But the more typical trip here is a 14 to 18-day trip. And this is like the big game hunting. This is where you're not really, most of these trips don't really fuss with the in-between areas. You load up in San Diego and you're going on a boat ride for 4 days. You load up and you're going for 4 days down. It's around a 4-day trip back. You're going literally like 1,000 miles on a boat, but taking you to remote locations where it is. I'd like for someone to also tell me if there's another place that fits this bill, but it just seems to be one of the best places in the world to catch yellowfin tuna over 200 pounds. It's like the best chance you have, like, to just consistently just book, like, I want to go on this trip. Like they're caught dang near every trip. It's just the area, the bait, their behavior. It just is very conducive to them becoming 200, 300, and like just a little bit of 400-pound fish finally are being caught. But one of the bigger class of yellowfin tuna in the world, definitely. There's probably some other exotic islands out there that are similar. If you know, reach out, let me know. I want to know about them. And I'd also like to see how easy it is to get to them, because I'm sure they're out there and they're probably not easy. But for this San Diego-based long-range fleet, they have trips going every year down there. Main target is trophy yellowfin tuna, 200-plus pound fish, and wahoo. Those are the two main things. There's other fish there, don't get me wrong, but those are the things that this is like when you want to go big game hunting out of San Diego. This is it. And you, Pat, you took a 16-day trip last year, right? Or a 15-day? Last year you did one of these trips, correct?
Yeah, so I was on a little bit of a unique. I was on a 16/13-day trip, which I'll touch on. I had reached out to Alec probably about a year and a half ago, just knowing his experience and that he'd worked on a number of these boats and had captained on some of these trips. And so he kind of gave me a list of boats that, hey, here's the boats that do these trips. And so after doing a little bit of research, I chose a trip on the Red Rooster 3, which coincidentally was a boat that Alec had worked on a long, long time ago. And so we did, I signed up for that. We left early March. I think it was March 1st or maybe February 28th or something last year. And like Alex said, I got to landing, and I think there were 22 people on this boat. And for sort of more local 3-day trips, this boat takes 30. So like Alec touched on earlier, there's typically fewer people on these longer range trips just to make it a little more comfortable. And so, I loaded up all my gear that I thought I would need. I learned a lot on this trip. There was a lot that I didn't know that I now know that I didn't know. But to me, that was a huge facet of the trip that made it a lot of fun. But like Alex said, we loaded up the bait and we started on a 4-day trip to basically go 1,000 miles due south, all the way down to Hurricane Bank, which is, gosh, I don't know, 600, 700 miles west of Cabo.
The way I remember it is 1,000 straight down and 450 out. And I think that's from Manzanillo, Mexico. It might be a little closer to the Cape. So either way, you're really far away from land. It is a remote place to go. And it's like, there's an archipelago of islands that kind of daisy chain its way to Cabo, and that kind of makes it a very unique in regards to like classification on where we're allowed to fish. It constitutes like near shore, since it's like within another island. You know what I mean? But that being said, those islands are pretty remote, uninhabited, and just kind of not occupied by the Mexican Navy. So either way, you're at like you said, 1,000 miles out, 400 miles west, remote, middle of nowhere. You are not going to see a small boat out there. You shouldn't. And if you do, you should probably ask if they're doing all right, if they need some water or something.
Yeah.
Some castaway situation going on if that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, one of the things, I consider myself a skilled angler. I've caught a lot of fish. I've caught quite a few big fish. My biggest fish, I've got a 750-pound blue marlin all by myself, no handoffs or anything. So, I run charters locally, so I catch a lot of 100 to 200 plus pound bluefin, off the coast of California. This was a completely different animal, though, fishing for these giant yellowfin. And what I thought was really, really cool about it was how technical it is. You think of big game hunting or big game fishing, you just think of brute force. There's so many small details that I picked up on. Like our charter master, like I thought I was doing really, really well. Like I was, probably out of the 22 guys, I was in the top 5 in terms of the number of fish landed by the end of the trip. And the charter master even complimented me. He's like, man, you did great for your first trip. And I said, oh, how many fish did you catch? Like, I think, what were you at, like, I don't forget what it was, a dozen or 15? He's like, no, I was probably closer to 25 or 30. I handed off a lot of fish. And this is a very, very humble guy. He was not making something up. But he was nice enough to share with me on the ride back up some of the different things that he does. And again, like, I'm a student of the game, so to speak. Like I love learning this stuff as much as I actually do, the actual fishing. So, if you're one of those people, like this is going to be a great kind of a trip to go on, because you're going to learn so many different things and tips and techniques, and that, I've been able to bring back to my local fishery. But even things like how to make my own wind-ons. Like last year I just bought them because I had no idea. And, the captain was really cool. He was like, listen, you guys aren't here because, you need the crew to catch your fish for you. Like, you paid a lot of money. You took a couple of weeks off of work or out of your life to come catch big giant fish. Like, sure, if you need a hand, we'll give you a hand, but like, don't rely on us. This is your deal and your trip. And so, I took it upon myself to learn as much as I could on this trip, and made it really a lot of fun. And I've got it coming up here in about a month or so. I'll be going again. And so, I feel like I'm much better prepared this year to fight some of these fish. But you've got the same issues fishing there than we had at Guadalupe, because there's just a ton of sharks, at Hurricane Bank. So you've got to have, your gear's got to be impeccable. You can't have any bad knots, bad line, bad hooks, things like that. Because when you get bit, you have to crank on these fish really hard and try to get them in really fast. Because the longer they're sitting in the water, the higher the likelihood is that you get sharked.
Yeah, and it's to just, like you see, to relate it to the Guadalupe. Well, they're different kinds of sharks, but the theme remains. It's a remote, wild place where the fishing for yellow or targeted species is good. But with that, there is a myriad of, obstacles, which are other predators or other life competing with you. Like, you said sharks, and these are different kind of sharks, not great whites, but there are these kind of Galapagos brown sharks. Sometimes there's hammerheads, oceanic white. There's a myriad of assorted tropical sharks that, they're just living there whether we're there or not. They're eating the weak and dying tuna because they're, there's no way they're going to catch a perfectly healthy tuna. People think sharks are the top of the food chain. I mean, just watch a tuna swim in the water and then watch a shark swim in the water. One is a absolute speed demon, catching bait fish and chasing things down, and one is like kind of slowly going around, not to take anything away, because they got their teeth, so they're able to eat these other fish. But at the end of the day, they're just picking off the tuna at the end of their life, or ones that get injured or whatever. Like, so they're there because that's where the food is, and then you enter this big boat, and we slow them down, aka make them weaker, and now they're very, way easier for these sharks to catch. So, like, to Pat's point, it's like the crew and the captain are there to help teach and support and help you land these fish through this myriad of wild obstacles that are there. There's sharks, there's dolphins sometimes, and these dolphins, like, they'll pick your baits off. There's these birds, like booby birds and frigate birds, that you gotta, you're not really, they're not going to eat your tuna, but they will eat live bait you're sending out and like pick it off, and just a lot of obstacles. And a lot of people view that as frustrating, which it is, because our target goal is to catch a trophy fish, our targeted fish, yellowfin or a wahoo out there. But just take a minute and remember, like, that's why the tuna are there, is because this place is suited for them. They're suited for the sharks, the birds, the turtles, the manta rays, the dolphins. It's Yeah. This trip is based around going to a place that's remote and everything that comes with it. And, I say unfortunately because like we painted this picture like 200-pound tuna, that's the trophy, that's the number we're shooting for. And sometimes you go there and it's wild, and it is just the amount of life is immense, and the tuna are just thick and they're biting, but they're all 150 pounds or 130 pounds, 80 to 150 pounders, but they're biting nails. And some people are kind of disappointed because you're like, not one 200 pounder, not one cow, which is what we call fish over 200 pounds, tuna over 200 pounds. And, part of me is like, yeah, but part of me is also like, we're turning our nose up to just these fish that are biting the paint off the boat. Like it's, just take a minute to recognize the, these places that are where fish just bite well and there's stuff competing with them and whatnot. Pat's talking about Hurricane Bank. It's an underwater seamount far away, the archipelago of islands leading out to it. There was a time where we were able to fish those. So we were able to daisy chain from Hurricane Bank to Clarion Island to San Benedicto, or excuse me, Partida, Rocco Partida, which is like, another, it's just a little spire, but anyway, and then two other islands, Socorro and San Benedicto. All of them have that same potential of a wild place and just acres of just tonnage of tuna and life and whatever. And they they get shut down and they get put into certain things come out to where you're not allowed to fish them, which I get their point. They want to keep these places good, so it's like it really is a fine line to walk between like being able to fish and then taking care of a place to be able to fish it later. So what can we do now? Like that's what not always, recently in my my more adult years, like what can be done so my daughter can maybe see this, can catch a fish here, can do all that, so like, and it could just be every little thing, just between like, not throwing the trash, like if something's about to blow in the water, just throw it in the trash can, or like if you're caught plenty of fish, it's, when I say plenty of fish, like on a trip like Pat's talking about, you catch 5 fish, you very well could have like 800 pounds of meat right there. So like, just like know what you want to take home, or know the target, know the size, you want to kill or keep, and you can keep it good, and just, you can keep the,
Well,
yeah.
to sort of speak to that point, like to give some accolades to the Red Rooster crew and Captain Andy. One morning on the trip down, every morning he would do a tackle seminar, but it was, one of the mornings he said, "Listen, guys, like only catch what you want to keep and process." Like he's like, "There's no bragging rights here. I don't care how many fish we bring back to the dock. Like let's just keep what you actually want to process. So if you don't want to fish, just tell us, and you know what? We'll let you reel it in. We've got cutters, and we'll cut the fish off right at the boat, so you can still say you quote unquote caught it. But we let the resource go so that it can live, and the resource can continue to grow and thrive and be better." And I think that I really respected that approach, because so many fishing people these days have this ego, like, I've got to come back and show, 8 million fish on the boat to show how great of a captain I am, or how great of an operation. And that just wasn't Andy's outlook. Like I really respected that. And I think a lot of people do. And it worked out great for me. I mean, I cut off a number of fish, and I already sort of planned in advance how many fish I wanted. And I had some buddies I was going to bring some fish to and things like that. So it kind of worked out great for the trip.
Yeah, it's like some people might think of it like, oh, you're counting your chickens before you hatch. Like, I don't know. You're going to this abundant place. Think in abundance. Like, you'll get your meat, man. Like, I mean, the writing will be on the wall, and the captains will advise like, okay, it's been tough. Like, yeah, I'd recommend keeping that. This is like the bigger, whatever. Like, whatever the condition is, they'll recommend. But more often than not, I've seen people keep too many fish for them to consume, and then they're back to the landing, and they're like, oh, what am I going to do with all this? Well, like, you weren't thinking about that. Like when there's I mean, it's
Yeah, and
exciting.
I mean,
I can't take it away from people. It makes people taps into this primal, this like, it makes grown men excited kids again. It's like the only way I could describe it, which is like just an amazing feeling, and it's amazing to be part of that for all the the years. What were you gonna say?
yeah, and like to touch on earlier, this is a 16-day trip, so it was 4 days down, 4 days back. I mean, we were fishing for 8 days, and when I say fishing, like we would wake up at like 2 or 3 in the morning to start making bait for the day. Even though we had a loaded with sardines, we would still make bait every day to get some of the local bait, which would be tube mackerel or salamis. And so we'd be up at, and make bait for a couple hours. And then before you know it, Captain would be like, all right, guys, like, it's still dark out, but he wanted to get to a spot like right at dusk or, right at sunrise. And so, then you start fishing and like 5:30 in the morning, and then you're fishing basically until dark. So,
Yeah.
To your point, like you're going to get your fish. Like, yeah, there's going to be a day or two where the fish might not be too hot, but then there's going to be other days where it's like, wide open. So that's the nice thing about doing a long trip like this. Like if you go do a local 3-day trip, like you might actually just get like a day or a day and a half of fishing. And if the fish shut off for a little bit, you could easily get skunked. But on a trip like this, like that's just not going to happen.
You're taking your lodge with you. You're building each day. Never say never. I've heard some bad stories, but the odds are in your favor for sure. Like fishing 8 days in a row, have 8 days to build off of each other. 8 days of unencumbered fishing, like not counting the travel days, but 8 days of go here, try this, do this, stay here, whatever. And you'll like, it's the only, I've never personally seen it to where you don't catch fish. Like whether or not you catch the grade of fish you want or whatever, that's one thing, but like you'll catch, it's a, you have enough to work with there. And you're talking about Andy and his mindset there, and I worked for Andy for several years, and the main factor there is his experience. Like guy's been doing it for, I don't even want to say how many years because I'm probably undercutting it, but like 20 or I don't remember, but I think he started when I think however old I am, that might be how old he's doing it. So I think maybe coming up to 30 years now, definitely more than 20. But like he's seen this environment change, and he's seen the dealing the people like with that dilemma at the dock and whatever, and he respects his resource. He likes coming back and it to still be good and like good grade. He loves that, and it's a new trend. I don't want to say it's a new trend, but relatively in the grand scheme of everything, it's like kind of a newer trend to emphasize quality over quantity in that regard. And hats off to that. And we could all keep that going, so that way my daughter, the kids that are growing up now who are watching, they're not watching VHSs anymore, they're watching YouTube or whatever, they're like, I can go there and still catch that, you know what I mean? We don't have to their dreams aren't crushed when somehow something gets passed to shut down somehow, like a place like Hurricane Bank, where because of like some biologist found a bunch of trash there, or like I don't know, something came up to instill some sort of laws to be put in place. We could start now to keep it alive and well for many generations to come, because if there's one thing better than actually fishing there in your shoes, it's seeing the joy it brings to people, and especially the people exactly like you're describing, watched it on VHS and then made that dream happen, dream about it as a kid, and then now you're living in that. So it's an amazing thing to keep rolling there. But
yeah, I mean, one other thing I'll add, just sort of on the quality, quantity, and sort of putting in your time and realistic expectations. One of the guys I became friends with, I think this last year was his 4th or 5th year going on the trip, and he'd never caught a cow, tune over 200 pounds. And so one morning, all of a sudden, he gets on a really nice fish on fly line sardine, and it was like a 210 pounds. So he was like beyond the moon, ecstatic, caught his first cow, celebrating all that. And then an hour or two later, it's his turn on the kite, And so he's got his kite bait out, and boom, he gets, bit, fighting this fish for a long time. Finally gets to the boat, 265. So now he's now caught a second cow of the day. And so just having an absolute, epic day. Well, a couple hours later, all of a sudden I see him floating out a balloon rig. And the balloon rig's out there a couple hundred yards, and you see a big explosion. He gets bit, and he was on that fish for about 2 hours. And when it got up and down and we could see it under the boat, we knew it was a really big fish. And sure enough, finally got it in the boat, 310-pound fish, which was the biggest fish of the trip. Just sort of speaks to, some years it's your year and some years it's not. But, if you go out there with the expectation of, man, I got to catch a cow or I got to catch a super cow, you're likely going to be disappointed. Go out there with the expectation of, let me enjoy this. Let me enjoy the people. Let me enjoy being out on the ocean. Let me enjoy this just majestic, world we have to enjoy, and you're guaranteed to have a great trip. And then, if you happen to catch a great fish, that's just going to be a bonus.
Yeah. It's only I live in statistics. Statistically, you keep catching them, one of them's going to be that big one. And the stuff you can do to like increase your chances of it being bigger. But at the end of the day, you go where there's a lot of them, and some are going to be smaller, and there's big ones, and sometimes there's going to be straight big ones, and sometimes there's going to be a giant mixed school of a 80 to 300 pounders. Sometimes it's just going to be a stampede of 240 to 350s. Like, what the, where did these, whatever. But like, there's only one way to do it and catch one, and that's just fish and enjoy and whatever. But that great mindset is, it's when it happens, so that's very good to hit on. And, kind of like to wrap it all. Environment aside, long range, the long range routine, how that all went down. One thing you keep coming back to, and this should be pretty emphasized too, is it's kind of crazy how the camaraderie aspect comes from this style of fishing. Pat, did you know anyone before you came on this trip?
Yeah. So that was the funny thing, is my buddies all thought I was nuts because I literally didn't know a single person on this trip. But, I'd been on other charters where, hey, you make friends, and, you got the commonality of we're all a bunch of, crazy fishermen going on a 16-day fishing trip. But, I quickly became friends with a couple of guys, and we've got our own private chat, like group text that we've been doing now leading up to this trip, and watching all the reports and reading the reports. But like, one of the guys is a professional trapper in Alaska. And so, was super cool just seeing pictures and hearing his stories of him trapping stuff in Alaska. And then another guy's like a finance guy from like Wall Street and lives in Manhattan. And he flies out here twice a year to do these really long trips. And he's a really young guy. Like, I think he's probably in his, early 40s, which is really young. It's tough for a lot of people to get away for 16 days that are working full time. So you get a lot of, people that are retired on these trips. But anyways, the two guys that I met were, the three of us were probably the youngest on that trip, but they still work full time. But, Chris was able to take some time off in the middle of winter in Alaska.
Yeah. And one of the, so kind of around, to emphasize something is like, you go on this trip, you're like you said, it's a lodge, goes to your places. Within this lodge, whatever atmosphere, whatever mindset comes along with it, the mindset that does come along with it is always that of like helping. And, I think that something that sets apart long range fishing, San Diego based long range fishing, from other, destination kind of places, is you're like living with your crew. You're living with the crew. You're living with the chef. You're living with your other anglers. You're like-minded people, so you're automatically getting along with something in common. And it's not, they're not just going to hand you a rod and say like wine. Like, it's kind of up to you to catch your fish and whatnot. That being said, it's structured to where you don't need to know squat and the crew and the other anglers are typically, they're like, oh, it's your first time, you didn't bring on a single rod. Yeah, we got, loaner gear. Like the crew will have loaner gear. They'll like these hooks, and they'll outfit you with everything you need. So there's like, you can come from Texas not just liking to fish. If you like to fish and you throw down that money, tell the person at the office, hey, this looks fun. I don't know nothing about it. I don't have any gear. Is it still a good idea to go? Absolutely. Jump on if you got the time. You'll get brought right along, and you will have the same, if not a better experience than, people who've been doing it for 30 years. So
it's funny you bring that up, because we literally had that happen last year on this 16-day trip. This guy had never been fishing for anything other than salmon up in basically outside of Seattle. And he got on that 16-day trip. Like, he basically didn't know how to tie knots or do anything and didn't have any gear at all. And, yeah, that's an extreme. That's a rarity. But to your point, like, the crew was helping him out and, did whatever he needed to do. And, all the way to the guys that have been doing it for 30 and 40 years that, don't need any help at all. But, regardless of where you're at, you're welcome on that boat, and the crew is going to help you out and take care of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the reason I bring that up is, like I'm saying, I'm going to be referring to San Diego based long range fishing a lot in future episodes and whatever, and circling back to this. I just wanted a little like crash course in what it is. And, this is a good, that's a huge part to that is just a style of fishing, a style of trip where it's kind of on you, but you're also not alone. And you get taken care of at some of these amazing wild destinations, So that's kind of one of the last things I wanted to emphasize as far as the routine style here. As far as I think we got some more time. Would you like to say anything more in regards to the long range fishing side before we give a little elevator rundown of your charter situation?
Yeah, I mean, I'd strongly encourage people to give it a shot. I mean, it really is a different style and a more comfortable style of fishing than just about anywhere else. I mean, I can think of one other place, I fished one time out of a resort in Costa Rica. But, that's kind of an extreme. And I was fortunate. We had a friend who had a 55 Viking down there we were fishing on at the resort. So, barring you've got those kind of connections.
Well, with those connections come like experiences may be similar, but price is probably going to be exponentially more for that dude. For an economic thing, I think this is like standalone in the world. Like you said, it's kind of on par with having a bud that has a 55 Viking in Costa Rica or an exotic place. Is that kind of what I'm?
Yeah, I mean, ballpark. If you're trying to figure out how much, I mean, any of these trips are in the neighborhood of $400 a day, which includes, all your food, all your bait, all your fish care. You got to pay to get your fish processed when you get back if you don't want to cut it up yourself. But other than that, the $400 a day and you show up with your gear, like that's an incredible deal. You think about how much a night would you spend for a hotel would be every bit of $200 plus. So, and then you get all your meals included. Like, I think these guys are crazy for doing it that cheap, but I think it just shows what a great value it is.
It's an incredible opportunity for the majority of people. It's an incredible opportunity to give someone the ability to go to these exotic, untouched places. It's one of the most realistic means to go to places that don't get much traffic. I don't know. I don't really see, I don't see anything like it in the world for that sort of price point. Like you're saying, like if you want to go to exotic places elsewhere, start talking about flights, start talking about hotels, start talking about chartering the boat, plus, and you're going to blow past $400 a day and $400 or $500 a day in no time at all. It might be more than 400 now, but it's like, still way on the lower end. So it's definitely the means to connect you with the wild places of the Pacific, of the Baja region. So that's really nice. Cool. So you're let's talk about your charter situation for a little bit. This is the long range deal. He's enjoying this as a passenger still. Give us a little still got a little bit of time. Let's dive into what you got going on with your charter business.
Yeah. So, about 2 years ago or so, I decided I wanted to be able to get out on the water a little bit more and share my passion of fishing with other people. And so I went ahead and got my my OUPV license, also known as a 6-pack license with the Coast Guard.
Nice and specific.
And
Most people just call it a captain's license, but this guy, just in case you're listening, check it.
Yeah,
just kidding.
well.
Sorry, giving you a hard time.
Yeah. So I've got a 37-foot Freeman catamaran center console boat, which for those of you that aren't familiar, Freeman are known for their speed and their comfort and stability. And so I've owned that boat now for a little over 3 years and have been running charters the last 2 summers. We primarily target bluefin tuna. And I'd say the sort of the peak of our season locally, I'm in Huntington Beach in Southern California, but the bulk of our season is August and September. Sometimes it can be a little bit earlier into July. Sometimes we're in a little bit into October, but I basically tell people August and September are sort of the peak months for catching the bluefin tuna. And we do full day charters. So we leave out of Huntington Beach. Charters include everything except you just bring whatever you want to eat and whatever you want to drink. We supply everything else. And then depending on where the fish are, we're running anywhere from, say, 30 or 35 miles offshore to 110 miles offshore with, I'd say the bulk of it is probably in the 60-mile range, give or take. And yeah, we're targeting giant bluefin tuna, which for us are going to be 100 to 200-pound fish. I'd say the majority of them are probably this past season are 130 to 150 range. And that's a lot of fun. I mean, I got a lot of my charter customers, we catch one fish and they say, that's it, we're good, let's go in. But we'll stay out all day. So typically we leave the dock at, have the customer meet us at 8:00 in the morning. And we typically are back at the dock by 6. And the reason we can do that is we're cruising at 50 miles an hour in that Freeman boat. And it allows us to get to the fishing grounds much, much quicker than your traditional sport fishing vessel that might be cruising at, 18 or 20 knots, 22 knots, something like that.
Yeah. And to kind of like relate this to long range fishing, although there is difference here, obviously bluefin versus yellowfin and just like exotic locations. Pat's in a little more of a metropolitan area, but this will be a later episode discussion with the bluefin tuna because of how much bigger they've gotten in the numbers that have increased in the last 10 years or so, which is incredible. But, you show up there, you get on, you jet out, and you're big game hunting in one day rather than committing, the long range fishing is different. You're going to an exotic location where it's just, like I said, it's just more, if there's something it's more wild. It's a different place, less people, further away. There's no way around that. There's big yellowfin tuna there, wahoo, and other random fish. With Pat's deal, you're localized, big game hunting, specific like that day. And like you said, you're targeting that trophy tuna. You're targeting that 200-pounder. And it's like, sometimes it's easy. Sometimes everyone's working, doing their part to find symphony of working the kite. I don't even want to get, it's a whole nother episode we can get into in regards to doing that. But regardless, a lot of effort focused on one fish, and that fish could be truly a fish of a lifetime. So Pat's operation brings that to you if you're under the time crunch and you want to catch a tuna, bluefin tuna, 100 to 200, even 300 pounds. I mean, obviously they can get bigger in Southern California. They haven't really gotten too much bigger than that, but who knows? So there's a good volume of them. And like I say, you just got to go out, keep catching them, and maybe one will be that one you want, and it's an excellent choice for someone who's limited on time and in Southern California, or if you want to come to Southern California, like easy access, airport, metropolitan place, I don't know, it's like one of the closest fisheries for big yellowfin tuna to a non-remote, hard to get to place. Like between LA and San Diego, there's plenty of airports, hotels, like ways to get around. It's kind of incredible how easy it is, and
Yeah, I
operations
think
like yours make it.
yeah, I think where you would benefit most from us is like we have a lot of um, corporate customers that are bringing clients out, or might do a employee event, bring the employees out for the day, or family that wants to come out, that just, like you said, they don't want to spend multiple days. They just want to come out, go fishing for the day and be home. And, where I have the boat dock, there's a couple of nice restaurants right there. So a lot of times people get off the boat and they walk, 100 yards, and they're sitting down having some drinks and having dinner, after a fun day of fishing. So really makes for a great experience and pretty easy going for, people that aren't hardcore fishermen, but yet want to get out there and see what it's all about and have that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll put some information. Below. Little plug on Pat's operation here for you all to click through and find out more information about here. But if I were to wrap it up here, it's been almost an hour and a half, so I think that's a fair time to stop on, and you can always come back to some of these conversations. But the intention of this episode was to kind of emphasize long range fishing and just highlight the remote places it could take you to, the incredible platforms that these boats are. Basically your lodge. It's your lodge that goes with you and can be parked on the literal spot. And it's the everyday person's access to wild remote places. It's made easy. We take it for granted. It's so convenient, and some of the places we discussed are open, right? Like, not open, but I mean, they are open. We're able to fish there now. Lehos Rocks, the Ridge, myriad of other destinations, but some places are wild and we have the ability to get there, like physically, but policies and stuff can change that, like Guadalupe Island and the Revillagigedo Islands and a lot of other islands, so we should start now, maximize your fishing, your outdoor experience. You can go while they're still open and not just saying everything's going to close, because it's, very well hopefully it won't, but do your part to respect the resource, respect the animals that you're harvesting, respect the environment. So there's no reason to ever put rules in place. They know that us as outdoorsmen, watermen, sportsmen, whatever you want to label us like-minded folks as, we take good care of what we love, and we want it to be there for years to come. And if that means releasing fish, great. If that means making sure that Snickers wrapper doesn't blow out of the trash can in the water, cool. You'll know what it is. Like, just imagine if there's any reason to not be there, don't do it, or figure out a way to make it better than we left it, and there's so many fish in the sea. So just keep these spots great. And we're all doing a good job enjoying the resource, but just take some time and definitely appreciate the places and do our part to protect them and keep us fishing there for many generations to come.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a special opportunity that we've got to be able to go to these places, and it takes everybody cooperating and doing the right thing to keep them available so that they're open not only for us but for future generations to hopefully enjoy. And the joy that I get from doing this stuff, I love to see other people experience that as well. So I think it's important we all do our part.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a good little stopping point. So thank you for joining me today, Pat. Thank you for being my talking buddy through the long range scene. Gave it a nice little hour and a half elevator pitch. Believe me, everyone, there's so many things, so many places, experiences, species that could be shared on this. And this was just a little glimpse into what it is. So thank you for joining me, Pat. Thank you all for joining us for this episode. If you guys have any questions or guest suggestions for the next one, please comment below or on the other platforms we have linked, be it Instagram or any streaming platform you're listening to this on. We'd love to keep building off of every conversation if someone has a relevant knowledge to bring to the table. So we would gladly appreciate any guest suggestions or comments. Please like, follow, subscribe to hear more. Appreciate you guys giving us a listen, and until next time, let's keep it wild. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, man. Take care.